You know I'm talking about British politics for a long time, and you know there are enough scandals. And the royal family's finances remain unchanged in year 2 of the reign of Charles III as well. Inscrutable, there are the shady businessmen around the northern English free port of Teesside, and postal workers wrongly convicted of theft have been waiting for rehabilitation for more than a decade. And that's just the beginning. And last but not least, the extent of illegal wiretapping by newspapers and the detective agencies commissioned by them that do not seem to have been clarified yet. There would be enough material for resourceful and somewhat investigative British political journalists there. Instead, dozens of smart people around the government district of Whitehall have been dedicating themselves for over a month to a phenomenon that the BBC chief reporter Chris Mason disparagingly calls plausible nonsense, and that's the speculation about the date of the next general election. In Great Britain, citizens will soon elect a new parliament, but an exact date has still not been set. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is toying with the election in the second half of the year, and this is too late for the Labour Party, as an earlier vote would be more convenient. The address, of course, is one of the most famous in the world. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has his government headquarters in London's Downing Street. But if the opposition has its way, then the Conservative politician is overstaying his time at number 10. He's occupying number 10 because he's too weak to face the country. That's the complaints of the largest opposition party. And they accuse Sunak of delaying the parliamentary elections. The British have to vote by January 2025 at the latest, and there has been speculation about the exact date for months. Sunak has now promised a vote in the second half of 2024. This would give his party more time because if the polls are correct, the Tories would currently lose the elections. Big time. So far, a vote in May or October was considered likely before the presidential election in the USA in November. The British government sets the exact date, much more quickly than here in Germany, for example. The fact that Sunak is now pointing to autumn has brought him criticism from other parties. As I said, Social Democratic Labour MP Jonathan Ashworth, for example, told the BBC he believed voters would conclude Sunak was afraid of the judgment of the British public, and they will wonder why he continues to sit in Downing Street. Also, the Liberal Democrats criticize Sunak, but they criticize him as a squatter. That the English, of course, have their experience with this because in the past houses were occupied not only here in Berlin and Hamburg, but also in London. So squatters are even on can't pay, will take it away. The word is also used for people whose rental agreement has expired but who still remain living in an apartment. In an analysis, the Times newspaper listed reasons why the Conservative Tories are postponing the election, though. Inflation could fall further. Here, Sunak was actually right with his promise that the inflation rate would at least halve. The government also hopes for a better economic situation, shorter waiting lists for the health service, and reduced migration. The health service is not on the table, though. On the other hand, the strategy of a later election also carries risks. But who knows what will happen? And the Tories could possibly lose even further. Commentators emphasize that Sunak has kept a backdoor open anyway. He said his working hypothesis was that the election would take place in the second half of the year. But this has clearly not ruled out spring still. Labour leader Keir Starmer would like to move into Downing Street, as you know, and an early election date would suit him given the polls that we all know. Election researcher John Curtis told the BBC on Friday that the consensus seemed to be emerging for November 14th. In his opinion, one must take into account that Sunak has not been in office long and therefore perhaps wants to complete at least 2 years. This is the case at the end of October. And political journalist Beth Rigby from the Sky News television channel predicts a tough election campaign. In any case, Downing Street is, along with the White House, one of the most famous government seats. Every day, tourists stand in front of the entrance to the small street, which has been cordoned off with a large gate for many years. The government writes that the most important decisions in British politics were made behind the black door of 10 Downing Street. Well, the address of the Federal Chancellery in Berlin, on the other hand, even in Germany, hardly anyone would know. But by the way, it's Willy Brandt-Straße 1, so Willy Brandt Street 1. But so far, halfway interested Brits only know 3 things about the election. First, traditionally for around 100 years, elections have always been held on a Thursday. Secondly, according to existing laws and conventions, the very latest date is January 28th in 2025. It's a Tuesday, but namely 5 years and 25 working days after the start of the current legislative period. And thirdly, the determination of the date is entirely up to the Prime Minister. The fact that the King refuses his advice and prevents the dissolution of Parliament would be tantamount to a constitutional nuclear weapon. But now, Rishi Sunak allayed the British fears of a January election campaign. The polls will definitely take place in 2024, as he revealed at the Christmas drinks party for the press. And a week earlier, he went a step further when visiting a neighborhood center in Mansfield in northern England. He said the election will not take place until the second half of the year because there would still be a lot for him to do by then. Since the third quarter is hardly an option due to the various holiday dates and party conferences, the date would then be in October or November. And this interpretation could be derived from Sunak's words. However, he expressly wanted his communication to be understood as a working hypothesis, as I said, and a working hypothesis that is, with this severability clause, the head of government opened a backdoor for the election date that is actually best suited from the perspective of the Tory base, and that would still be the beginning of May, at the same time as the local elections in the large parts of the country. In spring, the weather is often consistently nice, but the days are getting longer and longer, so there's enough daylight for the obligatory visits to the electorate. For the kingdom, personal contact with the parties at the front door, and ideally with the local constituency candidates, is one of the fixed points of their political life, no matter how eloquently prospective tenants of Downing Street discuss it on television. In any case, Sunak has elegantly duped the opposition with his working hypothesis. MPs from the Labour Party, which is well ahead in the polls, have been repeating the mantra for weeks that in Whitehall the May date is considered the government's worst-kept secret. The calculation behind this was probably that Sunak could be denounced as a coward if he postponed the May date in the spring. It was precisely for this reason that the editor-in-chief of the influential website Conservative Home advised his party leader to make a clear announcement at the beginning of the year. Sunak should not just rule out the May date that was written by Paul Goodman. He could name November 14th as the election date, and this will put an end to all speculation in one fell swoop. But apart from the fact that this day is the King's birthday and the gun salute doesn't really fit in well with democratic practice, Sunak didn't want to go that far yet. Is it because of the Conservative Home? Well, in the latest cabinet rankings, the readers of the website relegated the Prime Minister to last place. So Sunak has a lot of work to do to convince his party, and not to mention the whole of Great Britain. Rishi Sunak urged voters and his own party on Sunday to stick to the plan for long-term change at an election he has signaled will most probably come in the second half of the year. After firing the starting gun on election campaigning last week by saying it was his working hypothesis the vote's timing could be later this year, Sunak listed what he described as the progress he had overseen since taking office in late 22. With his governing Conservatives heavily trailing the opposition Labour Party in the polls, Sunak is hoping to turn the tide by giving more time to his agenda, including cutting taxes, health service waiting lists, and the number of migrant arrivals, issues he said he had started to tackle. Of course there's more to do, but progress is being made, he said. The country is now pointing in the right direction. That's at least what he told BBC Sunday with Laura Kunsberg. And if we stick to the plan and we can continue to deliver that long-term change the country needs, that's ultimately how we will provide everybody with a peace of mind that the future is going to be better for their children. That's what I'm setting out to deliver, Sunak said. Well, he has a lot of work to do. Sunak has so far struggled to make progress on his main pledges and heads a deeply fractious party, with some lawmakers threatening to oust him unless he cuts more taxes. He has hit one target of halving inflation by the end of 2023. That's a goal economists say that has little to do with government policy, though. And also he expressed confidence he could get his much criticized plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda through Parliament, and said he wanted to deliver further tax cuts by controlling spending, particularly welfare benefits, describing the number of people deemed unfit to work as concerning. But as I said earlier, the Liberals have accused Sunak of squatting in his number 10 office, and Labour Party leader Keir Starmer told Sky News he wanted the election to be as soon as possible, but that he feared Sunak just wanted to reach the 2-year mark for his premiership. I can't help feeling that all he really wants to do is to get 2 years clocked up of his own premiership, and that means is putting vanity before country, Starmer said. And so my challenge to him would be, if you've got a plan, set the date. If you haven't got a plan, just get on with it as quickly as possible, Starmer said. And yeah, I mean, if he postpones the election to as late as he can do it, or to November 14th, I don't know. I have absolutely no clue when this election will be. But at least it will definitely give me more topics for my videos. And if you want to see something else, the next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.